Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Welcome, dear listeners and viewers of Kardec Radio. Here we are, 12 years of Kardec Radio. Amazing experiences around the world. Hosts and guests who have been illuminating our lives. And today in our Health and Spirituality program that has been happening for 12 years, here we have a major breakthrough in science that leads us to new hope. New hope that on earth we are more than what the eyes can see. We are going to talk about a book that was recently launched in a major scientific publisher, Science of Life After Death. You can get a hold of this at Amazon. You know, we love Kindle, right? Here in the United States and around the world, we love it. I have my version on Kindle. So on my phone, I can read at any time, and you can see here, this is the cover, Science of Life After Death. And here we have the authors. They published it in Springer Briefs in Psychology. Dr. Alexander Moreira-Almeida, who is a full professor at the University of Juiz de Fora, in Brazil. Marianna de Abreu Costa, who is a postdoctoral fellow at the university where Dr. Moreira-Almeida is, and Dr. Humberto Schubert Coelho, who is an associate faculty at the University of Juiz de Fora as well. Well, they have been, more than this book, advocating for a shift in the paradigm of psychiatry. That's the least I can say to you. Dr. Alexander Moreira has been traveling around the world, talking to scientists, psychiatrists, presidents of psychiatric associations in different meetings around the world, telling everyone about their amazing findings in research and bridging it up to the inevitable implications in the treatment of patients and the outcomes of it. We have a lot to chat with them and get to know of the wonderful news. But go right now, go to Amazon and get your Kindle version or your paperback. It's named Science of Life After Death. I know we, in our audience here, we know about it, yes, but the world needs scientific evidence. We need scientists, and you're welcome to come here. I see Daisy, John De Rosa, Slavic. Friends, welcome to join us. This is a dialogue between us and them. Feel free to ask your question, make your comments, and let us rejoice in this victory of progress on earth. So here they are. Marianna Costa, thank you very much for coming here. Thank you, Alexander Moreira. Thank you, friends, for joining us. How are you, Marianna?
Thank you, Vanessa. I'm very well. It's a good pleasure to be here with you and your audience. Hi, everyone.
Thank you. My friend, Alexander Moreira, thank you so much for coming here. How have you been?
Hi, Vanessa. It's very good meeting you again, see you again. And hi, Marianna. And I'd like also to say hi to everyone who is watching us. It's a great pleasure being here.
I have to say something, Alexander. In 2006, when you and your beautiful family stopped by at Baltimore and you were visiting us, and later we went to Lilydale, New York, to the spiritualist city, I'll never forget when you brought this amazing article where Kardec talks about foreseeing the meeting between spiritists and spiritualists. And Josara Korngold translated it, and in the Spiritist out of Baltimore's new letter, we get a copy of it. Recently celebrating 25 years of the Spiritist out of Baltimore, we were recollecting those moments. They were very special, right?
Yeah, definitely. I thank you very much for providing us this experience.
All right, so let's go to this book. Of all the things you have been writing in science, 4 steps, Dr. Moreira, about advocating for, um, let me say this, a more inclusive, humane, psychiatric approach. Through your research, you have had evidence that patients are more than a physical body, right? And how did you, in this trio, you, Dr. Umberto, and Marianna, decided to write this book? Why this book now?
Okay, Vanessa, we've been involved in the field of psychiatry and psychiatry and spirituality for almost 30 years, and we've performed research on spirituality and psychiatry and spirituality and science for about 25 years, and now it's well established that most of the human population has some sort of religion, spirituality is nowadays well recognized by the major associations like World Psychiatric Association, World Health Organization, that spirituality is an important part of human existence. And also there are literally thousands of studies showing the impact of spiritual religious involvement in health, usually mental health. Usually this impact is positive. It may also be negative, but usually massively the impact is positive. So it's all of this now is well recognized that spirituality is still very prevalent in the world as a whole, and it impacts health. So these 2 points I think are very well established, are mainstream nowadays. They were not in the past, but they are now. And then we move to the next question. The spirituality and the religion is usually based and has its ultimate source in spiritual experiences. So the idea was to investigate what are these spiritual experiences? What is the nature of these spiritual experiences? So especially if these spiritual experiences actually points toward something beyond the brain. If our mind, our soul, our consciousness could exist, works, and survive after death and exist beyond the brain. So this was basically the major goal of this book.
Okay. I remember almost 20 years ago when you were in the United States doing your postdoc with Dr. Eric Canning at Duke University, right?
Yeah.
So there is compelling evidence of the fact that there are some spiritual practices that affect our health overall, the recovery of patients in their health as well. Now, when you talk about this book, you mention that there are several people who are still, they have arguments, right, against the understanding that we survive physical death. Can you comment?
Yeah. So as I said previously, the idea of some sort that we human beings are something beyond the physical world, that we have a transcendental aspect, a spiritual aspect, is the core of basically all spiritual traditions throughout history and throughout the world. And however, it's sometimes assumed that the existence of something beyond the brain would be necessarily anti-scientific, or it would be superstition. So the idea we had, before presenting the evidence, the scientific evidence for mind activity beyond the brain, or survival of consciousness after death, before presenting it, we thought it was very useful to remove some misguided assumptions, philosophical, methodological, or scientific misguided assumptions that would block or that would forbid the possibility of mind beyond the brain. Okay, I don't know, perhaps Marianna would like to add something at this point. Mari?
I think that in the initial of our book, we carefully discussed the neuroscience assumptions against the hypothesis of survival. And one thing that I think that it's very interesting that is that there's a lot of studies that correlate brain and mind. But in this kind of studies, sometimes we forgot that correlation, it's not a causation. And we are not, we don't propose that brain is not important. We agree brain is important to the manifestation of the consciousness. And I think that we have this careful doing the book.
Exactly. I agree with you, because as a neuroscientist myself, people often call it like pseudoscience when you talk about these things. And I read in my daughter's textbook, science textbook from school, that anything that is talking about these things is pseudoscience. And she came to me and said, Mom, they don't know what they're talking about. They think it's pseudoscience. She's only 10. And I said, you're right. They don't know what they're talking about, because you can't refute what you cannot prove against, right? So that's what I told one of my graduate students. I said, look, if you can't prove it, you can't say it doesn't exist.
Yeah, but I think two major misguided assumptions that we address in this specific chapter in the book. First is the belief that science requires materialism or physicalism. We call physicalism or materialism the idea, the assumption that everything that exists in the universe are reducible to physical force and particles. Something beyond that would be anti-scientific or pseudoscience or whatever. So there is some people believe that science has proved physicalism, or that science requires physicalism. However, this is completely false. First of all, the founding fathers of science like Galileo, Isaac Newton, Johannes Kepler, Francis Bacon, neither of them were physicalists. So this is the first point. The second point is that science cannot tell about everything that exists. Science can tell about some aspects of reality. This is one point. And the second most important point, as Marianna said previously, some people jump to the conclusion that because there is some association between brain activities and consciousness, experience, and mind, they jump to the conclusion that the mind is just the product of chemical or electrical activity of the brain. However, it's not so. These findings can be explained as if the brain is producing the mind, or if the brain is a tool for mind manifestation. So actually, these two major views about the mind-brain relationship: is the brain the producer of mind, or is the brain an instrument, a tool for mind manifestation. And just to finish, some people believe that neuroscience or scientific psychology necessarily implies a physicalism. And we discussed in the book that basically two major founders of scientific psychology, that was William James at Harvard and Wilhelm Wundt in Germany, both were not physicalists. Both believed that mind was something beyond the brain. And also some of the major founders of neuroscience, like Wilbur Penfield, a neurosurgeon, like Sir Charles Sherrington, Nobel awarded on neuroscience, creator of the idea of neuron that we have nowadays. All of them, for example, were also dualists. They believe that mind and brain are not the same, and the brain is a product of, the brain is a tool for mind manifestation. To present this data, we are not proving that mind is something beyond the brain. We are just showing that we cannot be so fast to assume that every scientist or science necessarily is physicalist. So in removing this misguided assumption, it would open readers' mind to take a fresh look and unbiased look at the evidence that we'll present later in the book.
It's very interesting. And I've come to know that After Death that you recently published is the first one ever of the kind being published through a scientific publisher, right?
Yeah, this book is the first book that deals specifically with evidence of consciousness survival after death that's published in a major scientific publisher. Yeah, it's the first one. Right. And we are very glad that Springer Nature, probably the largest and most important scientific publisher in the world, published the book. Springer select the book for a German translation. They are producing a German translation. Oh, wow. We just published a Portuguese translation, so we have here the English version, we have here the Portuguese version, and a Spanish version is on the way. It will be released probably next month, or this month, or early next month, Spanish version, a German version. And another very good news also is that we opened the lid. And then now the American Psychological Association this year has just published a book on the same topic. It's called Death as an Altered State of Consciousness, a Scientific Approach. So this is the second time that a major scientific publisher is publishing a book on empirical scientific evidence of survival of consciousness after death.
It's very interesting. The times have come. They're changing. Can you tell us a little bit about your experiencing in talking to people about this book in scientific meetings, at universities? Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, it has been basically all positive. We had expected that we would face much more resistance and some difficulties, but we haven't. We presented the book in a symposium at the American Psychiatric Association annual meeting in San Francisco this May. We presented it at the Brazilian Congress of Psychiatry this October. We presented the book at the major Brazilian universities, University of São Paulo, University of Campinas, Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, of Bahia, all the top universities in Brazil. So the book was always very well received with a strong interest. Of course, people raised questions, raised doubts, but not at all. We had no a priori denial or any aggressive reaction. On the opposite, people were very excited in knowing that there has been good research on the topic. So in addition, we have received book reviews in different areas. Since psychiatry, like the British Journal of Psychiatry, one of the top journals in the world, psychiatry, published a book review. Journals, leading journals in philosophy, in science of religion, in religious studies, in psychology of religion, we have had different sorts of book reviews and also very good receptions in universities and major scientific meetings.
So, yes, Marianna, go ahead.
I think it's important that in the Brazilian Congress of Psychiatry, our room was totally full, and some could not, some individuals could not watch our presentation, and we could see a movement around our book. The book was being sold there, so people was around talking about their own experience with the phenomenon. It was very interesting.
That's amazing. And I know, yeah, go ahead.
Just a point. As Marianna said, the room that we present the book at the Brazilian Congress of Psychiatry has 400 seats. So it was full packed. People could not enter anymore, and there was such a reaction. And one of the things very important, as Marianna said, many people, after the talk, they came to us to share their experience, sometimes for the first time. They were afraid of that experiences. They were not able to make sense of this experience for many years, and they feel released in being able to know that there are good studies on this, that they are not necessarily crazy stuff.
Yeah, and they are all psychiatrists or psychologists, studied people.
Wow, it's a new moment. But I know that to go from the studies to go to the mainstream and the implications in the treatment of patients, it requires a lot of collaboration. If the resistance was not strongly present, the question is, were there other colleagues, collaborators who want to join forces in the next steps? Did they present themselves?
Yeah, I think this is very... But first, this book, just to summarize also, this book is a very brief book, only 100 pages. We had to struggle very much and work very hard for a full year. It was during the pandemics that we three co-authors worked together. We had to revise, to review all the major scientific evidence available in the scientific literature to survival of consciousness. So we investigated out-of-body experience, near-death experiences, apparitions, after-death communications, mediumship, reports of alleged previous lives memory. These were the major phenomena that we investigate, because these are the phenomena best investigated in scientific literature. So we try to summarize it very briefly in 100 pages. It took us a major effort, but for those who'd like to go further, the book has more than 350 references, basic academic reference, for those who'd like to go further. That's usually the major complaint that we have regarding the book, is that you should have talking more about such and such stuff. You should talk more. Of course, we'd like to talk more, but the point is exactly this, because most people, this is one of the most important aspects. Most people in scientific community, in religious community, and also in general population, they are not aware of this scientific field. So the major idea of the book, major goal, was to present to people in a very brief book a general overview, as comprehensive as possible, of the field. And that's the point. This is one of the reviewers of our book, that is a professor at Durham University in UK. He was the chair of the Spirituality Interest Group of the Royal College of Psychiatry, Chris Cook. He wrote a review at the British Journal of Psychiatry, and he finished that is very good when you finish to read a book and wanting more, much more. And he said that it was exactly what the feeling that he had after finishing the book. He would like to read more. So that is the purpose, to allow people to have a quite comprehensive, but at the same time very concise perspective of the field, and then go further. And these next steps, we are including working in a specific new edition of the book, more expanded for in some years, and also in a journal. We are editing a journal. Perhaps Marianna could talk a bit about this also.
No, I was thinking about our project that we are initiating now about the impact of the mind-brain problem in psychiatry and in the neuroscience research, because you were talking earlier, Vanessa, which are the impacts of this. Né? If we can change our understanding about the conscious and about the mind-brain relationship, and we are investigating it now. First, trying to understand what psychiatrists and researchers here in Brazil believe about it, and trying to understand how it can bias the understanding about patient, the treatment that we do to the patients, and how it can bias the researchers, and how they create their investigations, how they do their hypotheses. I believe that it can impact a lot
Yes.
our understanding.
I agree with you. For example, as a psychologist, I have my clinical practice, and it's so much easier for me because I understand about it. I'm also a medium. So when I'm talking to a patient, I perceive both worlds. And if they are open to it, if they say, Vanessa, I want you to include our understanding of the science of the spirit, I mean, the way we progress is unbelievable. We come to a new state of the mind much faster than just ruling this out and saying, okay, let's talk about behavior, cognition, and we're not going to talk about everything else. First of all, patients, they take decisions based on their beliefs.
Yes.
So when you rule that out, you can't treat them well. But I have patients from all different religious backgrounds. And when we encourage them, say, look, go practice what you need to find the answer, to find new strengths, etc., they heal much faster. They get to a better balance, to a better state of the mind. They achieve the so-called optimism that Dr. Martin Seligman at Penn State University has been telling us as a major factor in our mental health. And he proved that we can learn to be optimistic. But when we have a broader perspective, we achieve great outcomes, not only much faster, but much more efficiently, right?
Yeah, we propose a biopsychosocial spiritual approach. And it's very, very important to recognize, as we said previously, when we are valuing the spiritual side of the patient, we are not, of course, neglecting the social, the biological, the psychological. We are adding and not excluding. I think this is a major point. And as you said, the worldview, the major framework that patients have or persons have to understand the life, to understand the struggles that they face is essential, is crucial in how they overcome this. And in the book, we present some evidence in the first chapter about the impact of believing after life. So there are several studies showing that believing after life, for example, decrease suicidal deaths, for example. There is a longitudinal study about 2 decades of follow-up showing that the believing after life, after controlling for many other variables, decreased 30% the death by suicide. It makes sense, of course, because usually the suicidal thoughts patients are trying to escape from suffering or to live life and to disappear. But if they believe that they don't disappear when they die, of course, it would decrease the suicidal ideation and even the death by suicide. There is also evidence that believing afterlife is less correlated with believing in a cynical world and more believe in a more just world. And because of that is related to lower levels of depression and anxiety symptoms.
Yeah.
So there is a major impact on this. But that's the point. But this belief, it seems, it impacts very positively. But as some people may say, oh, okay, but it's just wishful thinking. So the idea of this book is just exactly going beyond that. No matter if it's positive or not, the point is there evidence or not for such belief? So, because of course the belief, afterlife beliefs can maybe have a positive impact, but they can be false. So the idea here in this book, we focus specifically on the evidence. What is the evidence on the topic?
It's amazing. But on chapter 1, I found a statement that is quite striking. It says, if a scientific and rational concept of survival is to be achieved, the point of departure must necessarily be flexible with regard to the concept of the soul. I mean, this statement is, we need more elaboration on this, because to be flexible, what does that mean?
We usually call for intellectual humility. Okay? Intellectual, philosophical, and spiritual humility. You need to be humble. Because that's the point. It's quite too often, unfortunately, in science, in religion, and in philosophy, we are not humble enough. We assume our perspectives as the ultimate truth and close our minds to questioning, to new evidence. So the idea is to be really, our call here is for an open-minded, but at the same time, very rigorous approach. Because quite often people think that they are opposite, but they are not. The real scientific spirit is truly open-minded, open to everything that nature shows us. That's the point. Who has the ultimate word must be nature. Nature must tell us what exists or not. So we need to be humble to listen to the nature. And nature will answer through the empirical evidence, the scientific evidence. So we need to be humble to this, but at the same time, we need to be very rigorous to avoid bias, to avoid methodological problems and things like that.
And when you talk about this, we know that science runs with money, and it goes where the money is. We know if there are funds, research goes. There are no funds, research doesn't go, and the money is going to be where the people say they should be, right? At least here in the United States, the people say we want the money to go to cancer research, and then there are 10,000 of funds to cancer research, and to Alzheimer, and to diabetes, etc. But then when it comes to funding research on the science of life after death, we know that we still lack the financial support to it. So it's important that people who are listening to us, that they understand that sometimes things don't happen like that because we don't have the financial support to it that happens with the public approval, right? You want to talk a little bit about it?
Yes, I think it's essential what you are saying. This is why we spend an entire chapter removing misguided assumptions, because these misguided assumptions, for example, may make that an agency that would provide funds say, oh, we cannot fund this kind of research because this is pseudoscience. Or a scientific journal, it happens quite often. Yeah. They just make a desk rejection. They do not even take in consideration to analyze the methods, the rigors. No, it cannot be true, or it cannot be studied. So people state in the beginning that it cannot exist, and it cannot be any good research on the subject. So unfortunately, there is this happens. It's not uncommon, but also on the positive side, as we have experienced, there are many people that are open, but it still is very hard when we are tackling in these more controversial and core topics like if there is mind beyond the brain. Many funding agencies refuse to take in consideration an application, and even some journals. We have experienced that. It's very interesting. For example, when we presented to a major journal a study on evidence on mediumship about the possibility of mediums obtaining anomalous information about the disease that the medium could not reach by regular means, the editor refused in the beginning, stating that this is not a scientific topic, and because there is not good evidence so far, according to the editor, this study is worthless. So, but if science refuses new evidence because it didn't exist in the past, science will never develop, will never advance, because we always just keep repeating ourselves. So it's completely insane. So even in major scientific journals, we face bias and kind of dogmatism like that.
It's so interesting. But we have a major question here by a recent viewer, Carlton. Thank you very much. He's saying, but there are some things that by definition are outside of the realm of scientific research. So why would you make funds available to those areas? What would you say to him?
Yeah, I think that is a very good question. Of course, many things are not amenable to scientific approach. For example, ethics. Ethics in the ultimate nature is not a scientific aspect. Aesthetics is not in ultimate point a scientific aspect of life. Science cannot explain everything in life. As I said, the beauty or even ethical behavior, the values are beyond science. But there are things that are in the scope of science. And then we have another chapter in the book exactly showing how can we translate this question, that survival of consciousness, that was usually considered to be just a philosophical or religious question. How can we translate it in a scientific question? And we show that's possible to make it a scientific question because it can have empirical evidence that we could investigate that continuity of memory, of character, if there is evidence that the mind is still active with memory, with the character, would be a scientific evidence for survival. So, yeah, so that's the point. Yeah, we agree that not everything is scientific, but this specific point of survival is possible to be made scientific.
Of course, you have the book about it. So, and a lot of research, compelling research, has been released in that regard. So, another major question for us is this. There is this interesting chapter that you guys wrote. I think I love the titles. It says, what are the cultural barriers to fair consumption of the available evidence for survival? About cultural barriers. I think this is quite fascinating. Can you discuss a little bit about it?
Marianna, perhaps you could talk a bit about this and also about the available evidence. You did the chapter, specifically the chapter about the available evidence. Marianna did a wonderful job on that chapter. Could you just present briefly the major evidence and some barriers to accept it?
Yes. Well, as we were talking, we focused on maybe three kinds of phenomena: near-death experiences, mediumship, and cases of reincarnation type. So we try to take all the studies we could, of course. It's, as Alexander said earlier, We don't have space enough to discuss all studies, but it encompasses all maybe the more important studies in the last 150 years, I think. And we try to present qualitative and quantitative studies. We think that it's important to bring some qualitative studies because it can illustrate better what we are talking about. And then we brought some quantitative studies to strengthen our evidence. And in each of these phenomena, we try to discuss the alternative hypotheses considering each of these phenomena. So we do not deny that there are some alternative hypotheses that can explain each of the findings we are presenting. So we discuss it as deep as we could in this space of the book. And I don't know if I think that it's important that I can take the audience curious about the what we discussed here. And well, I think that there's something that you would like that I could talk, Alexander.
Yeah, I think that's the one of the major blocks to the analysis of the evidence that we discuss are interesting. The two extremisms. We have an extremism of denial, the scientific, the materialist dogmatic denial. So we know that it cannot exist something beyond the brain. So all evidence must be fraudulent, must be weak and things like that. So people do not even take a look at the evidence because they know in advance that it cannot exist. These are the dogmatic materialists. And the other side, we have the dogmatic religious people also. Some religious people say, well, we know in advance what is life after death and how it should be. And so we know what exists, what does not exist also. And then they refuse to take a look at evidence, for example, that are not in their religious dogmas. Like, for example, people refuse to take a look at evidence on mediumship or evidence on reincarnation. So it's very interesting. The two extremes, the more dogmatic religious and the more dogmatic materialists, they are united in refusing to take a look at the evidence and discuss it. I think these are the two major blocks. And another very important obstacle for a good discussion is people are not aware of the evidence. I think that's the point. As we said previously, most people, even during our scientific training, or even people in religious training, they do not have access to this evidence that is available. So people make comments or people make strong statements, but they do not know actually what is the actual scientific evidence available. So I think to overcome these two obstacles, first is to present the data and people be aware of it. This is the major goal of the book. And then also people be aware to try to avoid being dogmatic, to be open-minded to what nature tell us about what is the ultimate nature of human beings.
Exactly. I mean, the efforts that you guys are making, as Daisy Gallen said here, she works in the field of public health. She's a lecturer at Georgetown University and a graduate at George Washington University. She knows the scientific environment is very challenging. And it's good that it is challenging because we need very, as you said before, rigorous research. Yes. But we need to be open-minded. We can't just dismiss it out of a bias, right? And I know our friend here, Carlton, asking me a question. I think Dr. Moreira answered this question. in his last conversation about, because he's seeing Jesus picture here. This is Kardec Radio. It's not the university. So here in this room, we have our foundation, but it's not about, our personal belief, our personal religion that is being involved. We're talking about an unbiased environment in which science, you are given an opportunity to contemplate new scenarios for the very progress of science and the natural implications between all of us here, Marianna and Alexander. When you see a patient, you're talking about life. And I need to do my best to really give a hand to this patient. When you see mothers who are parents who are distraught in their hearts because their children are presenting things that they do not understand. For example, they are seeing spirits. They don't know, like teenagers, they come to me and say, "Oh, she's hearing voices, but she's very functional." It's not schizophrenia at all. I know it's another topic. Dr. is a great advocate in that area. What do? You're going to close your doors and say, "Sorry, there's nothing I can do for you." Or here's the schizophrenic medication because that's how we classify you. That's in a way very limiting and in some form inhumane. So we need to progress. And unfortunately, psychiatry is the only field of medicine in which we deal with the patient without strongly considering the full aspect, even the physical aspect. I know psychiatrists in the United States who are neuroscientists, and they're advocating for a deeper physical examination of the brain to really understand what's happening to this patient. So, in so many venues, there are things to be done. And this is one of them, to understand that the patient right principle is potentially someone beyond just what the eyes can see, right? It's not something only physical. So that's why I would like to close with you two of the 10,000 things. I was going to show a picture because this book has beautiful diagrams and graphs. I'll just show one of them for those who haven't seen the book yet. It's picture 6.1, and it's quite fascinating. Let me just see if I can open here. Hold on a second, please. And see if I can show this picture. Yep. Right. Let me see if I can see this. Yep. This one. About it's in one of the chapters, and just to show to you that this book relies strongly on scientific evidence and really sorts it all out for us, what's happening out there and where we need to go to potentially make things more not only clarified, but to really shift the paradigm. Right, Dr. Moreira?
This picture, it summarizes some of the conversions of some of the main evidence to survival. And I think Marianna, actually, she did this graphic. She could make a comment on it.
Yeah, I think that this figure it's a summing of the book, because we do believe that what would point to the survival hypothesis, the power is the many evidence, many issues in each evidence that points to the same hypothesis, and this is the evidence. We think that there is not only one evidence, but the power of the evidence is because we have many issues pointing to the same direction. This is the summing of the book.
The sum of the book.
I think it's interesting to show that because, for example, when we analyze near-death experience, for example, we see in near-death experience that people have clear memories and stable memories of this phenomena. That's different from people that are just in confusional states. We know that this experience is not related to previous beliefs or cultural aspects or not. Of course, cultural aspect influence the experience, but it does not determine the experience. And also people are able to report veridical perceptions, that things that happened while the patient was under cardiac arrest. And under cardiac arrest, the brain is not working because the brain receives no oxygen, no glucoses. So the brain is not working. And despite that, the person is able to be aware and describe what is happening. So these are sorts of evidence in near-death experience. In mediumship, for example, we know in mediumship that mediums can, in controlled situations, provide information that are not available through normal ways of communication. And not only information, but also skills, poetry, and personality traits. And even in children, in reincarnation case, children, as soon as they start to speak about 2, 3 years old, they start reporting alleged previous lives. But these alleged statements, they are verified with strong precision. Sometimes they have birthmarks that are compatible with rare birthmarks, that are compatible with the wound that caused the death of the alleged previous personality. So what is the most interesting of all of this? These are experiences that happens all over the world, all over history. These experiences have been reported by people from different backgrounds, different times. These experiences have been investigated by researchers from many different backgrounds, scientific and philosophical and religious backgrounds, and finding quite consistent data. So there is a convergence of all this evidence from different phenomena, from different researchers, and pointing to the best explanation being the survival of consciousness.
Basically, in each arrow, we try to answer some question about the alternative hypothesis. If you can see, there's a lot of argument concerning near-death experiences, mediumship, and case of reincarnation time. And what they argue against survival hypothesis and try to answer in each arrow.
That's amazing. This is amazing. It's so compelling that it's hard to refute. I think the people who refute, as you said, they have their dogmatism. There is lack of intellectual humility, and it's to the detriment of the progress of science. So we really need to have an open mind to assess this information, evaluate it. I remember how many times weekly at the University of Maryland for almost 20 years, gather together, get the new papers were coming out, and discuss all those papers that are coming out. And this is what we need: space to contemplate, to discuss. We don't need a verdict. We don't need anybody to come and say yes or no, but to give room for discussion. And the time has come. It's happening. You have been able, Dr. Alexander Moreira and Dr. Costa, you have been in many places in Brazil and in the US and in England, sharing these evidences with your amazing book. And this is just, we'll say, quote unquote, the beginning of much more to come, right? You want to share a little bit, just what's coming ahead of us, besides the expansion of the book, right?
And Vanessa, just another point also, refusing taking in consideration all this evidence, or neglecting the denial of analyzing this evidence would impact not only science, but also, of course, the practice in health in healthcare, like psychology, nursing, medicine, whatever. It also impact the understanding of human beings, and also would impact and impair the development of religion and spirituality. Because if we understand that the religions are ways that humans have to grasp this spiritual reality that exists beyond us, this transcendental reality. And if we see in each religion, they have their own developments. They know that they do not have the ultimate word, the final word. Is even in Christianity, for example, there is the idea of a progressive revelation of God in the history. So I think this is very interesting. And many Christians have reviewed our book in a very positive way. We had, for example, that professor in UK, Chris Cook, he's an Anglican minister in addition to be psychiatrist, and he provided a very nice review. We had reviews in Brazil from Catholics and evangelicals, also very interesting reviews in this subject. And even in the book, we have Humberto, a co-author, discussed one Lutheran theologian, one of the major Lutheran theologians in Germany. It's called Obst, O-B-S-T, Obst. He performed a major review of reports of reincarnation throughout the world, and he was very astonished how compelling were this evidence and perhaps the need of taking in consideration this aspect of reality. Because even in a religious or Christian perspective, the reality is a creation of God. If that thing exists, perhaps we need to expand our understanding of reality and not say in advance what must or must not exist. In addition, we have also a book called Reincarnation as Christian Hope from another theologian, but Anglican theologian, MacGregor. MacGregor, in the book Reincarnation as a Christian Hope, he discusses that Christianity as a whole does not discuss very much about the nature of the afterlife. The Christianity assumes and proposes the afterlife, but there is very little discussion about the nature of this afterlife, about this hope of afterlife. And he proposes, as an Anglican theologian, that reincarnation could be one way of this Christian hope for afterlife. So it's very interesting, all these sorts of discussions that have been raised by this kind of evidence and by the book.
That's amazing. Wow. It just brings us a sense of scientific delight to see this discussion going on, and your courage and your amazing efforts to do this and to advocate for a cause that may certainly help shift this paradigm once and for all. I just want to mention to those who are new to this conversation here, because Cardiac Radio has been talking about this for 12 years. And people can go to our YouTube channel. We're just getting before we only had the audio interviews, so we are getting all of them in podcasts at YouTube at Cardiac Radio. And one of the things is this: we need to bring this conversation more often to people. Like our friend here, Carlton, he's asking about the definition of death. That's a good, very important question. I would recommend that he reads this book. It's on Kindle or paperback at Amazon, and get a hold of this conversation, the definition. A while ago, I remember Dr. Schwartz, you and other scientists around the world, you had a international consensus. Before we close, would you like just to remind us about the outcome of that international coalition?
We published a manifesto for a post-materialist science.
Yes.
It was published in 2014, if I'm not wrong. It was published at the journal Explore, a scientific journal. And we call for post-materialistic science, in the sense that we must not restrict our views or hypotheses or our methods just to physical perspective, just to materialism. Of course, we need to take consideration material aspects of reality, but we cannot restrict ourselves. We cannot create these blocks, this little box that would not allow us to go further. So yes, and I think that science has developed a lot since then, and many good studies have been published, and more people are aware about these possibilities. I think really, I'm very optimistic. I've seen especially the students, the graduate undergrad students, they are very excited in being able to pursue careers in this topic, because in the past, probably when people start to having these interests, they were suppressed. You cannot talk about this, it's not allowed, it's not scientific, and many people had to diverge to other areas. But nowadays they are very happy and excited in being able to bring this interest to the scientific forum. That is where we need to discuss.
Fantastic. So for those who are watching us, we're talking about the science of life after death. It's a book. You can get it. We just got the link there. If you're in the comments of any of our channels, you can click on the link to Amazon, get your Kindle version or the paperback. And for those who want to listen to interviews, we'll talk about these topics throughout the 12 years. Here is Carol Correa kindly sharing here. She's a host at Cardiac Radio. She's sharing here the YouTube playlist for you. We're still updating the playlist. And thank you, Daisy Gallen. She is one of the hosts at Cardiac Radio as well, and she is here to share her gratitude, expressing her words. Thanks to all of your work and for this advocacy to this shifting the paradigm. We're looking forward to more of this. Count on us at Cardiac Radio. On our side, at Cardiac Radio, we ask everybody, keep praying. That you guys can do more. And our dear John DeRosa, a spiritist friend here from Northern Virginia, he says, when one considers all the people that have experienced NDEs, and especially those that may not have understood that they experienced one, there would be even more overwhelming evidence of consciousness after death. Said it all. So, final comments, Dr. Costa, for us. What would you like to say?
I'd like to thank you for your invitation, for being here with you and Alexander again.
Yes.
And thank you, the audience, for the questions. It was very interesting.
Thank you for this beautiful book. And Dr. Alexander Moreira-Almeida, please, your final comment.
I'd like to thank you all for being here to watch us. I'd like to invite you to take a look at the book. That's the point. We at the book, we do not try to push any conclusion. We present the major evidence, we discuss the different hypotheses, the positive and negative aspects, and then we present our conclusions. But we invite the reader to form their own ideas and their own conclusions. So here is the invitation to take a look at the book, to start thinking on that, and also to help to spread the word about this very challenging and exciting and inspiring field of investigation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We are deeply grateful. And as our dear friend Carlton here said, he's going to take a look at the book. And that's what it is. Let's continue the conversation. Hopefully we'll have you back here at Cardiac Radio, and count on us to share the good news. We want to thank all the viewers for their participation and the listeners through the app. You know, Cardiac Radio has an app. It's free of charge. You can listen to all these programs 24/7. So friends, we hope to see you next time. And make no mistake, the times have come at Cardiac Radio. Thank you, Dr. Moreira-Almeida. Thank you, Dr. Costa. We see you all next time. Thank you, friends.